good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. Trust me, I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to show up or not, so thank you. So thank you for coming. And, sometimes when you talk about homelessness, I don't know if I get the feeling sometimes people don't want to talk about it. So to come out on a Sunday afternoon, I greatly appreciate it. There are a few people here I do just want to introduce. One is my wife up at the front, Misty, and then these two wonderful people who just walked in are part of our team, Thomas and Annette, and then Eric over here. Raise your hand, Eric, so they can see you. They're part of our team also. So I had to pay people to come. No, I didn't. I didn't pay them. As we start this discussion, I'm going to try to say something up front that I hope makes some sense. But when I talk about homelessness and what's going on, at different times, I'll refer to different things. But it's really three different organizations that are kind of overlapped, and mainly because I'm in each of those organizations. And so if I say something, it's going to come out of that. And those three organizations are really Franklin Community Church, which is the church that I pastor. Franklin Community Development, which is a nonprofit our church started several years ago, and that's really where the homeless came from, and Franklin Community Development still does a lot of things with the homeless. And then Williamson County Homeless Alliance, which is where we really try to give the most press or the most attention to. And the Williamson County Homeless Alliance was an organization that started maybe 3 years ago now. I think it was in February of 2019. When we had a meeting at St. Paul's Episcopal Church that I didn't think anybody would show up for, and it was a couple hundred people that showed up for that. That was after an article that the Tennessean had done on what Franklin Community Development was doing with the homeless. And so when I talk about the homeless, and I may say, here's what we're doing, that may or may not be the Homeless Alliance. It could be the Community Development, and everybody who works for us has two name tags that they wear. One is Franklin Community Development, and the other is Williamson County Homeless Alliance. So depending on where they're going, they can show either badge. But overall, we're just talking about homelessness, and mainly homelessness in Williamson County. That I know a lot of people don't think we have homeless, or it's not a problem. And to be honest, I didn't really know about the problem until about 6 years ago or so. Our church meets at Johnson Elementary School, and we really have no plans of ever building a building. We're really, I tell people we're a ministry that does church on Sundays instead of a church that has ministries. And so we have group homes that we help operate and manage and other things like that. And so about 6 years ago, maybe 7, we started leasing a building on Natchez Street on the corner of Natchez and Adkin. That's our community center now. And I had an office over there because my office was at my house. And across the street from that community center was an empty lot that had a couple cars parked on it. And I noticed that there was always people in the cars. And so one day I went across the street to talk to them and found out that they were actually living in those cars. And that was really my first introduction to, well, we have a problem in Williamson County. And so that winter, we started having emergency shelter in the cold winter in our community center, which I have a picture I'll show you in a minute from that. And we did that. We would do that in the winter. And then we moved to a warehouse for the winter. And every year during the winter, the news stations out of Nashville as well as newspapers would contact me and want to do a story because they found it fascinating that there were homeless people in the wealthiest county in Tennessee. And so then it was after one of those newspaper articles that my phone just started blowing up, and we scheduled that meeting at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, and then really the rest is history. And it was our thought then that we needed to start another nonprofit, which was Williamson County Homeless Alliance, because there was no nonprofit in Williamson County whose sole purpose was homelessness. There were a lot of nonprofits like Grace Works, Franklin Community Development, Community Housing Partnership, and a host of churches that were all trying to work together with homeless, but they also had other things they were doing. But there was no other organization whose sole purpose was homelessness. And so that was really why we felt the need to start the Homeless Alliance. And so to get started in the presentation formally, now these three people were all homeless at one time. Now Jeff was pretty, did anybody ever see Jeff? Jeff was a long time He lived on the streets in Franklin for about 13 years. Just on the streets, he would sleep wherever he could. And he passed away maybe 3 years. I think it was 2019. I think it was before COVID. He passed away, but he would always stay with us when we were open. The other two, Fuzzy is the one in the front, and he's in our group home, one of our group homes, and Enrico is living with a family member still, right? Is that right, Thomas? So there was a group of about 6 or 7 guys that were kind of the first group of homeless people that I was working with, and they've all are either housed or, in Jeff's case, they have passed away. And so when I see that picture, I smile because there's some memories there, but also, you know, I know where they are now, and depending on your view of death, Jeff's doing pretty good now too. So they're all doing well. But their pictures are up here for a while. And that picture is probably about 5 years old. You know, here's the question that I get asked a lot: how many people experiencing homelessness do we have in Williamson County? And I try really hard to say people experiencing homelessness instead of just homeless people, because that's not who they are. It's what they are experiencing. And to be honest, nobody knows. If you look at the county as a whole, nobody knows, because we haven't tracked it. Our organization has been doing our best the last couple of years to track it, and we try to track it through what's called HMIS, which is a HUD thing, a Homeless Management Information System. That's a nationwide thing. But based on some anecdotal evidence of what I experience every day, plus what the Franklin Special School District reports as how many of their students are homeless, and the Franklin Special School District is around the 200, it's between 175 and 200 students that they say are homeless. And then the county school system reports around 250 or so children in their schools who are homeless. And you know that the children are not homeless by themselves. There's going to be a parent. Now, some of those could be siblings, and so you can't look at it that way. But so just kind of using an educated guess based on what the numbers that we serve, based on the numbers that I know GraceWorks serves, and then on what the schools report, and then trying to be somewhat conservative, I put that number in the county at probably being about 1,200 people who are homeless in the county. And you know, I could very easily come up with or show you 800 to 1,000 very, very easily, and then just kind of adding up a little bit. My gut tells me there's more, and really the reason it tells me there's more is I'll use Nashville as an example. The official number of homeless people in Nashville, what Nashville will tell you, Davidson County, is around the 6,000 mark, 6,000 to 7,000 homeless in Nashville, Davidson County. However, everyone in Nashville, Davidson County, who works with the homeless population will tell you it's more like 25 or 30,000 people who are homeless. And so if the numbers that they record are around 6,000, but the real result is around 30,000, then if I can come up with about 800 that I know pretty confidently are homeless, saying 1,200 in the county is not that much of a leap. And that's really where the number is, and I've used that number. The newspaper and different news organizations have quoted me on that number, and I still stand by that number. This past year, we probably just in our own work dealt with around a little over 200 individual people, and the vast majority of the people who we work with are Franklin city limits, not the county. We have what's called rural poverty, obviously, and rural homelessness is very, very hard to track, because a lot of the people who are homeless in the rural areas, just to be quite honest, they want to be left alone. They're kind of hidden. They don't want anybody to know where they are. And so it's really, really hard to track that. But I feel confident in that number of 1,200 people in the county who are homeless. And so out of that, again, we started the Homeless Alliance a couple of years ago. And here is kind of our stated purpose. Our goal as the Homeless Alliance is to have a permanent 365-day-a-year transitional sanctuary is what we call it, because we don't want to warehouse people. When I talk about a homeless shelter, I'm not talking about warehousing people, but I'm talking about a safe place where people can come who need it, and then from there we can get to know them through case management, try to find out what their issues are and how we can help. And so we want to minister holistically to the person experiencing homelessness that results in our community reaching what's called functional zero when it comes to homelessness. That's a HUD terminology, functional zero, but that's the goal, that as a county we can say when it comes to homelessness, we are at functional zero. And here's what that means. A community reaches functional zero when the homelessness in that community is rare, brief, and solved correctly and quickly. Rare, brief, and solved correctly and quickly. The goal, since we do receive some grant funding from HUD, this is why I mention HUD all the time. HUD has a goal that if somebody presents themselves to you as homeless, that you get them housed in 90 days. That's kind of the goal. And so if there's a community-wide plan in place, and it would take a community to do this, but if there's a community-wide plan in place where somebody presents themselves as homeless, and then with case management, they're put on the track with the goal that in 90 days, they are housed. And if you have that program together where that happens more often than not, then as a community, you can say that functionally you have zero homelessness in your community. And I think that that's a goal worth shooting for. And I think that's something that the community could be proud of, to say that there are only a handful of counties across the United States, and I've forgotten which ones they are, but they're in a lot of ways, they're like Williamson County when they're not major metropolitan cities. They're smaller, like in Austin, Texas, and places like that, that they have said that they've reached functional zero when it comes to veteran homelessness. But there's not hardly any that will say functional zero as a whole. But I think, I'm proud, I'm kind of arrogant when I say I'm from Williamson County. I think we can do it when nobody else can. And we have the resources. It's just sometimes I don't know if we have the will to really want to address this. But if we had a community-wide plan in place where homelessness is rare and it's solved quickly and correctly, and using HUD's definition, that 90-day period, then you can say you're functional zero. And so the Homeless Alliance opened up a transitional group home back in December, and the people stay there for 90 days, kind of with that goal. That, okay, we're going to put you in this home for 90 days, surround you with supportive services, and then by the end of that 90 days, try to make sure they have a permanent house, a permanent place to go. And that home could hold up to 8 people. And so over the course of the year, ideally that would be 32 people that you move. We have moved, and this really includes Franklin Community Development because it's been around a little bit longer. But in the last 3 to 4 years, we have moved 70 families, and a family is defined as an individual or a family. So 70 families from homelessness to permanent housing over that time, and so we're proud of that. And it's the majority. I want to say around 65 to 70% that after a couple of years they're still able to support themselves and stay in that. Sometimes people go back to the streets. But I think our track record is pretty good. I had a conversation with one of my employees, one of our partners, just the other day, and I've told my team this, so the ones here will know I've said it a bunch. That Jesus healed 10 lepers, 1 said thank you. So if Jesus, the Son of God, bats 10%, if we bat 1%, 1 out of 100, I think we're doing pretty good. And so that if 1 out of 100 people were able to help, there's a transformation that takes place where they never experience homelessness again. Then from my perspective, that's worth everything that we've done and how hard we've tried to work to make that happen. I want to go through this, but feel free to interrupt me with questions, but then there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions as well. But if I say something and you have a question, just stop. I'm a preacher, so once we get going, we don't know when to stop, right? All right. So, any questions so far? I'll just stop right there. How's that go? Yes, ma'am.
Well, you talked about the transitional house in Williamson County. Once they leave there, are they able to stay in Williamson County? Do we have affordable housing?
Very few of them can stay in Williamson County. Yeah, the affordable housing is yeah, this is going to be on government TV after a while, so I got to be careful what I say. But affordable housing is something our city leaders just don't want to seriously address. Because affordable housing is home ownership first, not rental. And it's homes around the 275 to 325 mark. There's no one in our city who, in a leadership position, who's talking about low-income housing. No one. And that's where we're losing. That's where we're losing a lot of people. We have been, as an organization, we have been slowly pulled into Murray County because of that, because we don't have place here, and Murray County has a significantly worse homeless situation than we do. And so we have slowly been kind of kicking and screaming, not wanting to, but just seeing the need. And a lot of people who we've worked with here in this county, we end up finding them housing in Murray County. The grant that we operate under, and this is Franklin Community Development, that helps with housing, we're supposed to work in 19 counties, which is every county but Davidson County and Rutherford County and Wilson County in the Middle Tennessee area. So we have placed people in Dixon County, Hickman County, Pulaski, I don't know what county that is, but Pulaski, Tennessee, and some of those have been people here in Williamson County, but that's the only place we can find housing for them at that. All right. Now, there are 5 things, and I could spend a lot of time here, but I'll just try to spend what's necessary. There are 5 things from my perspective that are needed in order to reach functional zero. This is the 5 things the community needs to have. 1 is emergency shelter, and right now the way that our emergency shelter works is if the temperature is 32 or below or 90 or above. And so we don't have it 365 days a year, and it gets a little bit complicated because we haven't had shelter in a few weeks, and then, you know, out of the blue, tonight might be 31, but we don't have shelter tonight because it's kind of, this time of year it's kind of hard to do that when it might be 30 degrees one day and then it won't be that again for 2 or 3 weeks. It's kind of hard to do that. We did this before COVID. During COVID, we went to hotels and there was lots of government money that was being put out there to put people in hotels because the government knew that mass shelters were not a good idea during COVID. All right, that makes sense, right? And so we started, during COVID, we started using hotels, and we used hotels up until January 1st of this year. And so for almost 2 years, and we spent in excess of $200,000 during that time in hotels. But fortunately, all of it through private donations and through grants, we've been able to pay for. But come January the 1st, we were out of that money, and so we went back to the churches. And so we've got, well, let me see, Steve, First United Methodist has been a huge partner with us, and Christ Community. So we have shelter at First United Methodist on certain nights of the week, Christ Community Church, Church of West Franklin a few nights a week, downtown historic Pres, and then come summer, the other First Pres by the golf course has picked up, said they want to do a night of the week as well. So I think, does that sound like everybody, Eric? Am I missing somebody? My ultimate goal is to have a permanent shelter, but until we reach that place, if we could have 31 churches who would say one night a month we'll provide shelter, then we could have a shelter 365 days a year. Does that make sense? From that, so it wouldn't be based on the temperature. It would just be that we have it, and so that's the ultimate goal. And we provide everything. We provide the monitors who stay there all night. We eat supper at our community center before we go to the church. We literally just need space, and we'll even bring the beds. So we literally just need space, and that's it. And usually they're there from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. The way that it worked this past winter is if we had shelter, they would come to the community center at 5 p.m. That's on Natchez Street. We would eat supper there, and then around 7 p.m. go to the church that we were staying at, spend the night at the church, and around 7 a.m. that morning leave. And sometimes they would come back to the community center. Sometimes if they had their own transportation, they would go on to work or go on to wherever they are. And we have a day shelter at our office space on Westmead Boulevard. So if the weather's really, really bad, people can come in during the daytime. And at our shelter, at our office space, we have washer and dryer and showers and a family room and caseworkers. So in theory, a person who is homeless stays in our shelter at night. During the day, they can come to the office, take a shower, wash their clothes. We have a computer lab, so they can get on the computer, look for work, and then they have a case manager there to talk to as well. So that's kind of in the ideal situation. So you got to have emergency sheltering. You need transitional housing. And so we have one right now. We need group homes, and we have another group home. And then there are some other group homes around town that really specialize on people who have addictions. But there are some other ones. and then permanent, affordable, and sustainable housing, which is where it's really, really, really difficult to get to. And then supportive wraparound services. And so in one form or another, we have all of those present right now. But some of them are stronger than the others. The permanent housing, we have a program, and this is under Franklin Community Development, that we call J297. It stands for Jeremiah 29:7, where we can house people in permanent housing and help them with their rent and utilities for a specified period of time, sometimes up to a year, and with the goal that they would take over the lease, or by the end of that year, we found them another place they can live where they can afford to live. And so, the first of the month, which is coming up right now, right at every first of the month, my wife will tell you I kind of go into a 2-day period where I don't do anything but write checks because of all the different rents that we're helping people pay. A lot of places we sign the leases, and so that we make sure that the landlord gets paid, and then the tenant will pay us. Usually starts out like 30% of their income, and then we try to build it up until they can afford all of the rent. And then we have case managers, as well as a lot of help in the community from churches and Grace Works and life coaches and different things that we can put people in touch with. So we have those in one form or another, but a lot of them could be stronger. But how many of you didn't even know we had that? Right? So we at least got that going on, and doing the best that we can with what we have. Any questions on those 5 things? So if we could get all those in place and have that plan where if somebody shows themselves homeless and within 90 days we have them in housing, then we could say that our community has functionally 0 homeless in our community. And again, I think that's a goal worth trying to get to. All right, I think these next slides are just some pictures. Yeah, you've seen that, those 3 guys. I considered all of them really, really good friends. Fuzzy is in our group home on Natchez Street. He's been there for about 4 years, and my wife told me if I ever ask him to leave, then she's leaving me. So I can't get rid of Fuzzy. All right, Fuzzy's there. All right. This is our monitor in one of our houses. This is Peter Pan, and a couple of Christmases ago, through a donor, we were able to get him a nice bike. Peter Pan is an Army veteran and lifelong Franklin resident, and was homeless, was struggling with addiction, and is just really doing a really good job. He's probably now about 68, you think? 68. And has done a really good job. He's been at the home probably for about 5 years. Now, here's the story. Here's why this is all so important. It took, when we got the group home on Natchez, and community housing actually bought that house, and there's apartments behind it. It's on Natchez Street. And I'm on the board at community housing, so I helped write the grant and everything to run it as a group home. And it took a long time to get that home open for several different reasons. But Peter Pan was constantly coming. His real name is Michael, but he goes by Peter Pan because when he was in school, every day for lunch, he ate peanut butter sandwiches. And so he got that nickname. And so Peter Pan would come to me and say, "Pastor, you going to let me come live in the house?" And I was like, well, usually when he came to me, he was drunk. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, I'd really like to see you. You need to get some help. Can you go? We're not open yet, so use this time to go and try to get some help. And so he would constantly ask me that, and at different stages of sobriety. And so then we had the house open. There were just a few guys in the house. And Peter Pan came, asked me again, he said, "Can I come live in the house?" And he caught me on a good day because I said yes, all right? And so he was excited. He came and lived in the house, and that would have been around September of that particular year. And come December, close to Christmas, Channel 5 called me and wanted to do a story on the house and the Christmas with a good news story with these guys in the house and Christmas. And so Channel 5 came out to the house. And by the way, Peter Pan has given me permission to tell this story. And so there were about 3 of the guys that were there at the time. There's about 7 guys in the house, but Peter Pan was one of them. And the reporter had asked me all kinds of questions. And she went around the guys and said, "What does this mean for you living here? And when she got to Peter Pan and said, what does this mean? Peter Pan's a real quiet guy. And she said, what does it mean for you living here? And Peter Pan, without hesitation, said, Pastor Kevin saved my life. And now, he never told me that before, and this is not about me, but that's just what he said. And the reporter said, what do you mean? And Peter Pan said, well, I kept bothering Pastor Kevin about wanting to live in the house, and he kept telling me, you know, that if I lived in the house, I had to be sober and all this kind of stuff, and I was trying my best. And he said, and so I decided to ask Pastor Kevin one more time if he'd let me in the house. And if he said no, I was going to kill myself. Yeah. And I said yes. Now, I didn't know any of that until he told the reporter that. And I thought, this is extremely important that we do this. Because I can tell you another story of a guy who came to me wanting to move into the house, and we did not have room in the house. And a week later, he hung himself. And so I've got the good news with Peter Pan, but I also have that memory of this guy who I didn't have room for him. And a week after he asked me, he killed himself. And so this is literally a matter of life and death. It just doesn't get any simpler than that when it comes to trying to solve our homeless problem. And so Peter Pan is a great guy. He does the grocery shopping for me and other things for the house. This is our community center. It's not very big, about maybe 1,500 square feet, one block building on the corner of Atkins Street in Natchez. But the amount of stuff that goes through this community center every day is we have a food distribution once a week that goes out of there. We have all kinds of other activities, and people drop off. I mean, the amount of clothes and furniture and different things that people just drop off there, and that we try our best to hand out to other people is something else. And that's really where the homeless shelter started. That's where we had it the very first, was in that building about 6 or 7 years ago, is where we started this. And we still use it to this day. Here's some other pictures. This is the group home on Natchez Street. There's 7 guys there right now. I can have 8, but the difference between 7 and 8 is really something else. You wouldn't think that it's that way. But 7 guys in a house, great. 8 guys in a house, boy, I don't know what happens with that 8th guy, but something happens. It's a large house. I mean, we've got 3 full baths in it, and then attached to it in the back are 3 apartments. Thomas lives in one of the apartments and kind of keeps an eye on the house for me. And so on this location, there's a group home for 8 people, and then 2 one-bedroom apartments that are affordable, and 1 2-bedroom apartment that is affordable. And we kind of oversee all of that. Community housing owns it, but we oversee it. And that's been operating now, I think 5 years is how long that we've been open there. And that's for guys. And all the guys in there were homeless at one time or another. These are 2 homes in Columbia that I'm showing you. So yeah, you know, we've been drugged down into Murray County. This one and this one are what's called shared living. And so basically there's 7 large rooms, I mean really good sized rooms. And every room, it's like an efficiency apartment where they have their own bathroom and then a large area, and then they share a kitchen. And so there's 7 in one house, 7 in another, and so they're full. And the person who built those, and again, we lease these, we don't buy them, but the person who built those is about to start construction on 2 more for us. And so we'll have access to, hopefully soon, 28 beds. And this is permanent. Once people sign a lease and they live there, and a lot of them are from Williamson County, but we get them there because they can live there for it's $350 a month. And then they're on their own. It's shared living, and it's not a program. It's independent. It's independent living. And so those are the 2 homes there. That car is not there anymore. That was a neighbor's car we had to tow away. All right. This is our office. It's just the sign. It's the old Habitat built office on West Mead. If you remember where that is where our office is now. And I'm on the far left. Eric is the office manager, and then Luis, who runs Better Options, but he also runs our J297 program. And then We have Annette and Thomas over here, and Teresa Burns, if you remember her, she used to run Gap Ministry. She's one of our case managers. Gwen Bright is case manager, and Tony Carlew is a case manager, and then a retired Lutheran minister named Charlie Bowker, who is kind of our just chaplain that we go to and cry on his shoulder often. All there behind Pueblo Real, which is really, really horrible around lunchtime because it smells. It smells so good. Right? So if you're ever in the area, just stop by and come in and see it. And you can see our computer lab and the washroom dryer and kind of the day shelter idea from there. This is just part of our team and some of our board members as well as the other ones. And this is our new group home on West Meade Boulevard as well. And I got a picture here, maybe a little bit better. Yeah, that's the group home. Again, 7 people. We have the idea that this could very well be co-ed because since it's only there for 90 days, it could be men and women both. And at least that's the goal there. We've just got all the security cameras installed, so it'll be like Big Brother, this reality TV show. And it's right beside our offices. Basically on West Meade, you got our office space and then Walker Memorial Baptist Church parking lot and then that house. And the way God worked that out is really just a miracle. Quick story on that. I was praying for day shelters. Lord, we really need a day shelter. I was not praying for office space. Everybody had laptop computers and we just were spread out. And Luis told me about that building, the old Habitat place, because his friend had purchased it and thought he would give me a good deal on it to rent. And so I went to look at it, told him, Luis, we're not going to be able to afford this. And when I walked in and saw the shower in the bathroom, I thought, this is a day shelter. I don't really care about, there's 10 offices. I don't really care about the offices. It's a day shelter. And so that made me interested. But then also, about 3 weeks before I looked at that office space, I got a phone call from Scott and Barbara Layden, who go to Steve's church, First United Methodist. They're kind of mortgage company, right? And Barbara called me and said, hey, Kevin, we're updating our desk, and I've got 10 desks. I want to know if you wanted them. Now, I didn't need 10 desks. I didn't even know where I was going to put them. But I knew, oh, this is coming from a mortgage company. These are nice desks. I mean, these are not, your typical, these are nice desks. And so I said, well, Barbara, if you're not in a hurry to get rid of them, yeah, I'll take them. I think I'll just store them because I might need them one day. And so that was 10 desks. Then about 3 weeks later, I go look at this office space. There's 10 offices there. And then what we were able to lease it for was something we could afford. And I called Barbara and I said, you're not going to believe this, but we're going to come get the desks from you and take them straight to our office. They're not going to have to go in storage. And they were a heavy, heavy desk. They were really, really nice desks, but that's just how God worked. And it was right beside this house that we had been working on. And so God always has a plan. 2 pictures that are coming up here. Remember, Jeff, the picture I showed you? When we started using the office space, my father-in-law actually and my son-in-law were cutting the grass, and my father-in-law came and got me and said, Kevin, there's a campsite over here. And it was in some bushes in the corner on the back side of Walker Memorial parking lot, and so right up against the property where we were. And I went and I looked, and as soon as I saw it, I knew that this was one of Jeff's places, because I knew Jeff had a place that he slept in that area. Never knew exactly where it was, but I knew it was there, and it was his favorite beer cans that were there. And he had been dead for about 2 years at that time, and so it had been untouched. This is 1 block off Main Street, right behind Pueblo Real, all of that. And there was somebody in our community who lived there like that for 13 years in Franklin, right there. And it's still there. Sometimes I think, man, I need to protect this, but eventually I think it'll be overgrown. But there was a foam thing in there that he would sleep on, and I can't prove it, but I'm 100% confident that was one of Jeff's places that he stayed. And then this is on Natchez Street. When I first started working with the people who are homeless, On the far right, that shed, at one time there were 4 guys who lived in there. They've all, I'm trying to think of those 4, because Jeff would have been one of them. He stayed there when it got really, really cold. And we weren't open, he would stay there. And so all those guys have been housed where they passed away. And then on another piece of property is this shack that Fuzzy built. And this is on Natchez Street. Now that's $1 million house behind it, see it? See it? So for about 4 or 5 years, Fuzzy lived there. And I would periodically go check on those guys if I hadn't seen them in a while. And there was a couple times, I remember one time I walked in, I knocked on Fuzzy's place and nobody said anything. And so I opened the door and Fuzzy was underneath a whole bunch of blankets. So I thought, oh no, he's died. But he was just in a really, really deep sleep, thankfully. Where the other picture I showed you, and this is in Franklin. There used to be a tent city that would pop up periodically behind Home Depot by the interstate, but now they built up apartments, and so those are gone. Now in Fairview, the interstate in Fairview, there's a tent city that pops up quite a bit. But now here, and this, every year HUD has this thing that they call point in time, where all across the country on a particular night in the winter, communities are supposed to go and count how many people are experiencing homelessness. So how many people are in shelters, how many people are living on the streets, and you count them and you report back to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, it's the federal agency. And then your city can qualify for different grants based on the number that you had. And so this tent city out close to Fairview, there was about 20 people who were living there. And that was also really, really notorious for drugs, but there was about 20 people living in that tent city. And I was trying to get out there because I heard about it and I was like, man, I need to get out there and see those people and see if there's anything that they need. And a week before the point in time count, the Fairview police went, cleaned that tent city out, got rid of everybody, and then Fairview counted 0 homeless on that point in time count. Now that particular year, I reported to Franklin on that particular night, 30-something homeless. And the city of Franklin all but called me a liar. They contacted community housing and said, this can't be true. Kevin's making this up. And I was like, let me show you the paperwork. I can verify every one of these people and where they are, what car they live in, and what's going on from that. So anyway, so I show those 2 pictures just to show that this is what has been going on in Franklin that nobody has known about, that people have done their best to keep quiet. And so that's where Fuzzy lived, and so I got this wonderful picture. There is Fuzzy on his birthday. That was this year, wasn't it? Yeah. He's in the group home. And boy, he causes problems sometimes. But he's a special person from that. Just the other day he got glasses, and so I didn't know that he couldn't see very well. But he got glasses. When he came to us with the help of some other people in the community, we got him on disability so he could get his knee replaced. He had a really, really bad knee, and Annette helped him recoup from all of that. And the doctor said it was one of the worst knees he'd ever seen. Because here's kind of the way it works. If you're homeless and you're between the ages of 18 and 62, you do not have insurance. You just don't. You don't have insurance. And so you have these health problems, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do about it. And so like I said, we were able to, Kristen Grimm helped us with that, get his disability worked out so he could have knee surgery from that. All right, I think that's, oh, no. Yeah, this is important. Type of homelessness in Franklin, because it is a little bit different than other places. So in Franklin, here's what, there's 3 types of homelessness. Chronic homelessness, which means you've been homeless for a long time, long time, and so Jeff would have fit that category. And then there's temporary homelessness, or you could say situational, and so somebody, because of COVID or because of something in life, they lost their job, so they end up filing for bankruptcy, or they end up losing their apartment, and they move into homelessness for a little while. And if it's temporary or situational, there's a really, really good chance with some supportive services, they're going to be able to get back out of that. Chronic homelessness is very, very difficult to get people out of, but temporary or situational homeless, there's a good chance things will turn around and they'll get out of it. And then couch surfing is really what we have in Franklin more often than not. Couch surfing is just, they're just going from couch to couch. They don't have anywhere to live, so they stay here until they wear out their visit, and they go there until they wear out their visit, and they go somewhere else. And so that's a huge difference in Franklin, the homeless in Franklin, compared to what you have in Nashville. We do have very few people who are actually just living on the street with nowhere to go. Jeff was one of those, and there are a few others, and I know where they stay, but I'm not going to tell you. But the majority that we have is people who they just don't have anywhere to live, and so when they get some money together, they'll stay in a hotel for a while, then they'll stay with aunts and uncles and all of that. So it's just called couch surfing. Now the difficulty is different organizations define homelessness differently. And so it becomes difficult to try to get the resources to help them because they may not reach, like for example, if you're couch surfing, by definition, HUD says you're not homeless. However, by HUD's definition, if you live in an apartment and you got an eviction notice that you got to be out in 30 days, at that point you're homeless, even though you're still in your apartment. And so it gets, but yet the school system is going to say you're homeless if you're couch surfing. And if you're couch surfing, a judge could step in and take your children away from you if you're couch surfing, but yet you can't get the resources for being homeless because you're not homeless by, it's really convoluted. And those are some of the things that we have to deal with. Reasons for homelessness are great. Mental illness, I put at the top because I do think these are not in any particular order except mental illness. Again, studies will tell you that half of people who are homeless are mentally ill. What that means is they've been diagnosed with the mental illness. I'm just telling you from experience that it's more like 100%. Because if you've been homeless for any length of time, you at the very least, you've got PTSD, at the very least. And so mental illness, and our society still hasn't figured out a way to take care of those who are mentally ill. We've just got a long way to go in that. But mental illness, and I could tell you stories of mental illness that are somewhat humorous, but at the same time, they're also a little sad and scary. But then you have addictions, alcohol or drugs. Jeff was a really, really bad alcoholic. And again, since he didn't have insurance, Jeff finally came to me one day and said he wanted help. Finally, after about, I don't know how long I'd known him, he said, I got to get off the street. He was starting to lose his toes due to some health reasons as well as hypothermia. And so he says, and so I thought, okay, and he's an alcoholic, which means no treatment center is going to take him until he goes to detox. And 1 week of detox can cost up to $8,000. He has no insurance. I don't have $8,000. Through Tony Owens, another friend of ours, he was able to get a scholarship. We got him to detox for a week. After that week, was able to send him to a treatment center. And to make a long story short, I had to raise upwards of $20,000 to keep him in treatment. And he was sober for a little over 100 days before he went back to the streets. And people say, Kevin, you wasted your money. And I'm like, no, those were really, really good 100 days. I'd go see Jeff. Man, we had good conversations. Alcoholism, drug addiction is a disease. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for people who have cancer and they're cured of cancer, or the cancer goes in remission for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then the cancer comes back. Do we say we wasted all that money? No, you didn't waste any of it. So I didn't waste a dime of that to help Jeff. But part of my goal is that somehow or another I could establish a trust fund, for lack of a better word. And if that trust fund was a couple $1 million, which I know it is, it would be at least that. If somebody came to me and said, I want help, man, I've got a trust fund that's for nothing but treatment. Because here's the thing, if you got insurance or you got money, there's bed available. If you don't, there's no beds available. But I could call a treatment center and say, hey, I need to send somebody. I can pay you cash up front. I guarantee you they got a bed available somehow or another for that. And so that's kind of one of my goals, is to have that trust fund set aside that would be for nothing but treatment. Because what happens, there's only one free treatment center around that I know of, and it's in Columbia. And it could take me 2 weeks to a month to get somebody in. So if somebody comes to me and say they want help, and I say, okay, I want to call, but it might be a month before you get help, what's going to happen during that month? Right? They're not going to want help at the end of that. So to be able, as soon as somebody says they want help, to be able to get them into detox and get them into treatment is so important. And if they don't have insurance, there's just no other way. There's just no other way to do it. So mental illness, addictions, loss of jobs, and through COVID, that was a big deal here, where people lost their jobs. Life circumstances, which would be loss of job, but also medical things, or people, somebody just, they go through a divorce and they just kind of give up on life. And so they just, a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness at one time were professionals and had good careers, but something happened in life and they just checked out. And then aging out of foster care. There's a lot of people between the ages of 18 and 22 who are homeless because, once you're 18, you're not in foster care anymore. And you still don't have life figured out. And so you end up being homeless because of that. Any questions on that slide? All right, here from 2021, here's just a snapshot of what happened. This is just our organization, so this doesn't include GraceWorks, and it doesn't include community housing. But over 2021, we provided 291 nights of shelter. So that's 80% of all the possible. There's only 365 nights. So out of 365 nights, we provided shelter in one form or another, 291 of those nights. That means we had shelter 8 out of 10 nights all year long. That means there was a total of 1,437 beds provided. So that's the way that HUD would want us to report this, is that we provided 1,437 nights of shelter, is the way HUD would want it. But that doesn't compute in my head because there's only 365 nights, but beds. Now this could be the same person who stayed in the hotel, for a week or so, but that's how that averages out to 5 people per night. But there was 200 individual people, over 200 individual people that we worked with in 2021. And then you break that down by average, that's just 2 men, 2 women, and 1 child every night. 2.5 of the 5, so half of them would have been white, 2 African Americans per night, and then it's really less than 0.5 it's Hispanics, not very many Hispanics. But basically, you see the racial component here, when basically half of your homeless are African American, and in Williamson County, African Americans make up less than 8% of the population total. But yet half of the homeless would be that. All right, December was our highest average, where there was 11 people per night. January was the lowest one, and the reason for that is because we were out of money. In January, we were out of money. And so that's when we had to pivot and go back to the shelters from that. This year, January 1, we started going back to the shelters, and we had a very, very cold winter, did we not? And so we had to shut down our shelter for 2 weeks because we had a COVID exposure. And so we went back to hotels, and I didn't know where I was going to get the money from, but some churches stepped up to help me cover that for that 2-week period. And then we went back to the churches, and when the temperature gets to be 90 or above, we'll be in the churches again from that. So what do the people do who stay in our shelter when it's not 32 or below or 90 or above? They sleep in their cars, they sleep at the laundromat, they sleep on somebody's porch, somebody's couch. And that's what they do until we're able to provide shelter again from that. And during the day, they hang out here sometimes. They hang out at the library. I know one guy in particular. There is no stereotypical person. We got people, like I said, who are homeless and they're on addiction. They have addictions, but yet one of the first homeless guys I worked with lived in his truck and worked for the county, was a county employee, but was homeless. And I kept saying, I need to tell, no, please. He was afraid he'd get fired if they found out he was homeless, but he worked for the county. I've had fast food managers stay with us from time to time because they're homeless and they're managing fast food restaurants in town. And so for a little while in our group home, I had a medical doctor who stayed in the group home because he had nowhere else to live. He found a place pretty quick, but for a little while, he was a medical doctor and was homeless from that. All right, I think that's the last slide. So the next slide is questions. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Could you comment on what the state of Tennessee does, if anything at all, for kids aging out of foster care to prepare them for life out in the world?
There's really not anything. Now, there's private organizations and private nonprofits who have some things, but outside of that, once they age out, they're out. And now that was something to me when I first started doing this. Like when I got the group home open on Natchez Street, all of a sudden my phone started ringing off the hook of people between 18 and 21 who were homeless in Franklin that I didn't know. I knew about the older people who were homeless, but the teenagers basically and young adults who were homeless was quite surprising to me. Now that brings its own challenges. We have an unwritten rule now that you got to be 21 to be in our group home because of just they really need their own type of group home and program for that age. But as far as the state, there's not anything. Now, they could, if they get the right help they need, they could go to college, and obviously through the different lottery systems and other things, I mean, they should be able to go to college. But if they're not getting that support as they're growing up, then once they're 18, they don't go to college, they don't join the military, there's a good chance they're going to be on the street for that. Yeah.
And also, could you also comment on, at one point you showed a slide earlier where I think you called it like a community center or something like that during the day. You talked about food going out of that.
Yeah.
How do any local or regional food banks plug into what you do in terms of how people get fed?
Yeah, the giveaway, and Samantha walked in. She's my assistant, and she runs the community center. But it's a group of people from St. Paul's Episcopal Church, and they go to is it Trader Joe's mainly, and pick up food every week and bring it there, and then Samantha helps distribute it. But it's through a ministry through St. Paul's. Then the Giving Garden will give us the United Methodist Church Giving Garden gives us food quite a bit. But the amount, we don't have any way, we don't do a good job of keeping track of how much it is, but the amount of food that we give away on a weekly basis, then you multiply that for a year, is quite substantial. And very few people know that it's going on. And the reason we don't want people to know because we can't feed everybody. So, it's just the people who come they know when we're going to be open, and they come, and usually within an hour it's pretty much all gone from that. But yeah, so it's not really through a food bank. It's through Trader Joe's mainly, and a group from St. Paul's who go and pick it up. And that's been going on for, I don't know, 3 years maybe? More? Yeah, so once a week for 5 years. It's really amazing what happens. And it's amazing what happens when people find out. One of the first years that we had our shelter in the community center, we had a really, really bad ice storm. And so for 14 days I had, I think it was around 10 guys who pretty much did not leave the community center. So 10 adult men for 14 days in a community center. And I didn't tell anybody. I don't know how people found out, but all of a sudden, like Panera Bread and other restaurants were calling me saying, "Hey, we got some food. We hear that you got some guys over there. Can we bring it over?" And so they didn't miss a meal during that time. So it's amazing how word got out about that. And God's protected us because we've never had anything bad happen, but we've had some interesting things happen from time to time from that. Any other questions? We got a whole nother hour, right? It's just, Yes, ma'am.
Well, I know that you've asked the community to provide meals for the
Yeah.
nights that the shelters are open. Is there anything else the community should know that the ways people can help?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and the way that we operate right now is, I mean, the greatest need is always financial, because the homeless, working with this group of people is all outgo, no income, and there's no return on investment. You know, well, Chris Whitney's a good friend of mine, one gen away, and he's got a great, he's got a great thing going on, and he can tell people, for every dollar you give me, I can feed X number of people. And he's right about that. And it's like, wow, that's really good. But if you look at the money we spend, it's like, you know what? For every $12,000 you give me, I can house somebody for a year. All of a sudden, it's like, what? That's not as, And so we have the volunteer opportunities for food, only when we're open for shelter. And we don't have our own shelter, so there's not like, come and help fix up stuff. So there's not like a lot of volunteer opportunities like that. The nature of what we do is long-term care, which just has a high price to it. I'm like, even when we operate the shelter in churches, that cost around $300 or so every night that we do it. Now, some of that is insurance that we have to cover. Some of that is just other expenses and the monitors and all of that. And so that's cheaper than a hotel, because if we got 4 people or we had 14 people, it's pretty much that's going to be the cost. But you can imagine, just if it's $300 a night and I want to do this 365 nights a year, what does that equal to? And the people who are experiencing homelessness at that point, a lot of them say they want to help, and a lot of them, not a lot, but we've had a few who, when they got back on their feet, they come back and help us, or they have sent money to us. But we operate by the goodwill of the people and by grants that God has blessed us with. Because I'm not a grant writer, but I've had a little bit of success in that way. I wish we would just get more help. More and more churches are coming on board to help with shelter as well as to help financially, which I'm very, very grateful for. I mean, there's no reason in this community we don't have a fully staffed 365-day-a-year shelter. There's just not. There's just not except there's not the will. There's not the will to do it. Hope that wasn't too hard. Yes, ma'am.
Earlier, when you were saying what groups of people fell into, I guess, different kinds of homelessness, I don't think you mentioned seniors. Is that because seniors would fall into above 62 and fall into some kind of subsidized senior housing? I mean, what happens to seniors?
Well, you guys, Annette and Thomas helped with the shelter a lot. We had a lot of seniors. Yeah, and so there's just not enough of the senior living places. Now, in every group who's trying to help, if somebody's a senior citizen, or if they're a single parent, they would kind of sometimes jump to the front of the line of help. But unfortunately, you just can't. Franklin Housing Authority has 2 senior development places, and I think they're working on a 3rd one. But they're full with a waiting list so long it's hard to get in, and all the ones in Nashville are full. There's just no good answer, and so we try our best. We have put people, made them roommates, whether they wanted to be or not. Just what, if you move in together, you might be able to afford this, but on your own you can't. I would say the 14 beds. Luis, you can help me. Luis came in. Luis runs J297, but the 14 beds in Columbia, the average age is probably 60 or above, isn't it? Of the 14 beds that are down there. The average age in my group home on Natchez Street is going to be, you know, I'm 56, so it's going to be 56 to maybe 61 or 62. We got a couple people who, the youngest one's probably in their 40s. How old is Tab? Is he in his 40s? Or Jarvis? Jarvis. Yeah, but is he 40 yet? Yeah. Okay, so the youngest is 40, and then Peter Pan is probably the oldest at 68. So no, I mean that's the reality. The only, and it's not that's 100%, but if somebody, now Peter Pan's the exception because he stays with us, but if somebody presents themselves to us and they are truly homeless and they're a veteran with the right paperwork that they got released from, finding them housing is not very difficult. There's lots and lots of help for veterans. But if you're not a veteran or you're kind of in between that, you're not quite 62 yet. It can be tough. And then when people have been homeless for a while, you know, like we got a guy who's at our transitional house now who his 90 days is about up, and we've done our best to help him. But what's your plan? What's your plan? Well, my plan is to save enough money, which I think he has, to buy a vehicle, and then I can stay in my vehicle. I mean, that's his plan, you know, and that's probably what he'll do. But before he came to the transitional house, he was living in a tent by the river. So I guess a vehicle is a step up, you know, from that. Yeah. Steve?
Two questions. Do you see any problem with the grants in jeopardy coming up? And secondly, when and how will Williamson County homeless be able to get the businesses plugged in a big way?
Yeah, the vast majority of grants that have helped us with homeless were emergency grants because of COVID. And those are pretty much over with, especially at the amount they were given. And so those grants, yeah, I mean, you know, there's a couple of grants that will help a little bit, but not on the same level as those grants did. Our housing grant, the J297 program, we've just been approved, and it'll be our 4th year of it. And so the housing component will still be there, but what happens is that basically it's full. We can't put anybody else in a house until somebody else is able to come out of the program, which means they're on their own, you know. And so then we can add. We have a program kind of off to the side that a few churches, I think your church has done at least once, but a few churches have helped where the churches will help subsidize somebody's housing. In fact, that's kind of another dream that I have, is if every church would, because I believe that as a pastor, I believe that this is primarily lays at the responsibility of the churches and the synagogues and the mosques. You know, God's people are the ones who have to take care of this primarily, even though most of my funding comes from the government. But if every church would commit to helping subsidize an apartment, then all of a sudden, you know, here's how it could work. Somebody comes to us and they're homeless. Okay, so maybe they came to our shelter, and so we kept them in our shelter for a few weeks so we could get to know them. Then we moved them into our transitional home. During this time, they're getting the help that they need, supportive services. They're working full time, but it's going to be at a livable wage in Franklin is $30 an hour. You cannot live in Franklin for less than $30 an hour without help. That's just the fact. And so they got a job. Maybe they're making $13, $14 an hour. And it might be a mom or a dad with a couple of kids, so they're going to go and we found an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, but it's $1,500, $1,600 a month. They can't afford that, but they could afford maybe $500 or $600 a month. And so if a church would come along and say, you know what, for the next year we'll help subsidize this, we'll commit to $500 or $1,000 a month for this family, do it through us, so we'll sign the lease. The church would give the money to us, the person would give the money to us that they're paying, and then we would pay the landlord from that. And the landlords are happy with that because we pay our bills regardless if we got the money or not. We're going to pay it. If every church in Franklin, in Williamson County did that, you're talking over 300 families you're helping. And then the next year, reevaluate. Okay, we can't, they can do 800 this year, so now we're only going to do 800. And reevaluate it and help subsidize it. It would put a big dent in the affordable housing situation that we're in. Our church does that, and we're less than 100 people. And we do that. And so regardless of the size of your church, you can do that. And to be quite honestly, if your church is helping build houses in other countries and you're not doing that here, you're sinning. To be quite honest. I mean, our church builds houses in Honduras, but we also do it here. And can you imagine if every church in Middle Tennessee did that, there would be no affordable housing problem in Middle Tennessee. But we're not doing that. We look to the government to do it, and the government is doing the best they can, I think, and I'm very thankful for that. But if God's people would do it, it would go a long way into solving this problem that's just not being solved right now. Right? I didn't mean to preach, but any other questions? Keep asking away. This is fun.
I just have one other question when you were giving the talk. If I understood you right, I thought I understood you to say that the homeless or people experiencing homelessness, that situation was worse in
Murray County, Columbia.
Why would that be the case?
I don't know, but it is. And we're doing what we can, and have plans on trying to help the churches in Murray County try to get together and do this. But it's worse, And obviously, it's worse in Nashville than anywhere. But Murray County. Then you get out in the more rural counties, and nobody really knows. I mean, again, we could talk about poverty a little bit, but there are people who live in Williamson County in the country who do not have indoor plumbing. In Williamson County. And they do not have running water in their house. And they own their house. But they're in poverty in Williamson County. And that's just scratch beneath the surface of what's going on in our county. And then, the back to Steve's question, I didn't finish answering it. The one big grant that we have that helped us get the house and helped us start this program is over with June 30th. And so come July 1, we will have no more rental assistance money. We're already out of hotel money, and two of my part-time case managers won't be with us anymore. Now we will still have 2 full-time case managers because they're under another grant, and our office manager. But yeah, it's going to be okay. The need's not going away, but the resources are going away if we don't get more community buy-in from that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just
that handles the grant side. I'm still concerned about businesses plugging in. We have tremendous opportunities with businesses, and we've just not tapped them.
We have it now. Let me see. Well, I got one board member here. The Homeless Alliance, we're putting a job description together to try to get a developmental director on board to help with the businesses and just the overall fundraising. I mean, the homeless, not Franklin Community Development, the Homeless Alliance budget for 2022 is, I think, $600,000. This is the Homeless Alliance budget. Now, if you throw in Franklin Community Development's budget on top of that, you're looking at another $200,000 or $300,000. So you're talking almost $1 million. But the Franklin Community Development does more than homelessness, and so we do other things in the community besides that. But I think that's right. Does that sound about right? It was around $600,000. I don't think it hit $700,000, but it was around $600,000 for the 2022 budget. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, but my whole salary comes from the church. I don't get paid a dime from any of the grants or doing any of the work for the Homeless Alliance. It's all, my salary is completely from the church. From that. So that $600,000, I'm considered the executive director of Williamson Homeless Alliance. So that $600,000 does not include an executive director salary. It's just completely from the church. From that. Anything else? The good news is, and I just didn't have time, and we have some videos of some of the people who we've housed, and you know, we had a situation recently. A lady contacted, I don't remember now if it was the lady or if it was the apartment manager, but anyway, we were contacted about a 70-year-old lady. How old was Miss Clark? Is that about right? 70? 73? All right. And who was about to be evicted from her apartment. And usually people will call me and say, I'm about to be evicted, and you find out that they're not about to be evicted. The landlord is starting the eviction process, which could take, you know, a few months. But by the time this lady or the apartment manager contacted us, the deputies were coming in 2 days to get her stuff out of the apartment. So she had already been through court, gone through the whole thing, in her 70s, was about to be evicted. Her apartment was $2,000 a month. And she was on a fixed income. She had some inheritance money that she blew through pretty quickly, and so she'd been living in this apartment for about 7 years. But now she was just down to her fixed income, and there were some mental issues there, and so we worked with her. She ended up moving into a hotel, I think for close to 2 months. Wasn't it? Before we could find her a place in Fairview, where we finally found her a place in Fairview that was based on her income from that. But she had to go through a lot because she was living in a $2,000 apartment, used to that type of lifestyle, now moving into a fixed income apartment, not quite the same. And man, she was happy. At the end of the day, she was finally happy. It took her a while to get happy about it, but as a staff, it took all of us 2 months working with her, not giving up. We put her stuff in storage, and then was accused of stealing her stuff because we put it in storage. You can imagine, if you work with elderly people, sometimes you can imagine, you know, if they're going through maybe a little bit of dementia, what that was like. But I'm very proud of my staff for that, and we haven't heard anything from her, so that means she's doing good. We helped reconnect her with her family, because she was estranged from her family for a while, and so those kind of things, you know, that's that 1 in 100. Those kind of things are what helps you get up. What we're entering into now is a time where when people call us, we try to be compassionate, we try to offer hope, but yet it's like, well, we don't really have anything right now. And that's hard, and it's taxing on your staff if they're having to say that over and over and over again, because the needs are so real. The number of children who are homeless in our community has gone up, I think a lot because of COVID. So a lot of single moms. When we were in hotels, there were lots of single moms. When we went back to the churches, the single moms sometimes I think are a little bit more afraid to come. So it ends up being either single ladies or single guys. But the number of children in our community who are homeless is increasing and living on their streets. You know, periodically when it's real cold at night, I'll go to the different parking lots to look for people who are homeless. And I'm amazed over and over again of how many times they would rather stay in their cars because they're afraid, especially if they're ladies. This may not have been the smartest thing. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and it was single digits, and I was in Walmart parking lot, and I can tell when a car has somebody living in it, and I went and knocked on the window, and I kind of stand back, and it was a lady, and I'm thinking, first of all, Kevin, this may not be the smartest thing. You're 6'4" guy, 10 o'clock at night. You know, this is a lady. You know, no telling what but I give them my card, let them know I'm a pastor, But she called me. We kept in touch for a little while, but she was just afraid. She'd rather have a gift card from Kroger or Walmart so she could keep gas in her car and keep her car warm than to come into a shelter. And I think sometimes I can understand that, especially if they've gone to the shelters in Nashville. They just want to be left alone, but they still need to be cared for, right? Somebody like Jeff, he was a bad alcoholic, but he still needed to be cared for. And to have a place where somebody could come. Florida did a study several years ago on homelessness, Tallahassee, Florida, and they discovered that the average homeless person cost taxpayers around $30,000 or $40,000 a year. Okay, because of they get arrested, go to jail. A lot of times in Franklin, our homeless shelter is the county jail, or they do damage to businesses, or they get sick and go to the hospital and they don't have insurance. And so on average, a homeless person costs taxpayers around $30,000 or $40,000 a year. But you could shelter them in a homeless shelter for around $12,000 a year. And so the money that our county would save if they would see the importance of having a shelter would be off the charts. That we could do this, and it's safer for somebody like Jeff to be in a shelter at night than to be outside. And Jeff he would tell me if it was really, really cold and we weren't open, he would go to a business because he didn't want to hurt anybody, but he would go to the business and throw a brick through the window, break it, wait for the police to come, be arrested. That way he'd go to jail for a week and be out of the cold. That was his, it would have been far better for everybody if he would have had a place every night that he could have come just to lay his head down and stay safe and keep the community safe as well. At least that's the way I see it from that. I don't have to go to a 5, do I? No. Okay, all right. All right, we can sing a hymn, take up an offering, do something like that. All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope it was informative.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. It has been a pleasure.
You can write these down if you need to get a hold of me.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Kevin, for coming out. There will hopefully be more in this series as community conversations. I don't have anything set in stone yet, but if we have more, it'll be on our email, the website, advertised throughout the library. You guys are free to stay and chat, mingle for a while, because we do have here until 5. And this will also be on WCTV, not immediately, but eventually. If you ever want to watch a playback or share it with someone, it will be available. So thank you, everyone.